Hello, and welcome to the Healthy Bit podcast, where we talk about stacking healthy habits, whether that's food or exercise, into our daily lives so that we can make better choices and hopefully thank our future selves. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about different forms of exercise and deadlifting and what we should be doing in terms of is it correct to do weightlifting? And are there any problems with doing so? So let's dive straight into it. But before we do, I'm Hayley Jarville, and I'd like to introduce my co-host, Henry Herbert.
Hello, Haley. How you doing? Quick shameless plug from me. If you enjoy listening to the Healthy Bit, please do give us a comment or a like or share it with one of your friends or family. Everything helps to get our little fledgling project off the ground. It might seem small, but every comment and like really does help. We've also started working with Fountain, where we're launching the podcast on, but you can stream it directly through them. They're really great application. But you can also listen to it on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, and all the other usual ones. Anyway, on with the show.
So we've already had a couple of listeners ask us questions on techniques and whether deadlifting's safe and whether we should be doing it. And that's a really interesting topic because we often get asked this in clinic, and especially at the moment when everyone's trying to take up maybe new forms of exercise. And I think people are starting to shift their mindset into what type of exercise they should focus on.
Yeah.
Whether you're young, old, middle-aged, whatever, I think most people are aware that they should be doing some form of resistance training or strength training, especially for bones. And as you know, Henry, bone health is one of my specialist interest areas.
Yeah.
And it's really essential that we do weight training. But we often see, again, people who are successful in doing weight training and they go on to lifting heavier and they have successful rehab programs and they achieve great things and they're strong and they're muscular. And then we see the opposite of that in clinic, which my kind of passion is to try and help people to stop falling into those kind of pitfalls where they often end up injured and regret doing what they've done and sometimes have caused themselves quite severe or serious spinal injuries, which means that they're no longer able to continue with that. So we're going to start by just talking a bit about what you should really think about before you start lifting heavy weights, because people often go, well, surely I just think about what weight I want to do. And actually, you need to look at your position to squat down onto the floor without any weight and to see what your spinal position is like. Because some people they start to bend and say this is the spine, Henry, here. And for those of you listening, I'm just showing a picture of my hand just representing a spine, but in sort of like a 45-degree angle. And when some people bend down, they will tend to like stick their bottom out. So they'll curve almost upwards. Their bum will go towards the ceiling and they'll dip with their lower back. And that will happen at a certain point of their knee bend or their squat position. And that's what we tend to look for as physios if they're shifting that into that position. Or they might do the opposite where they really tuck their bum under and they tend to kind of spinally flex. So they might bend a little bit more from either the middle point of the back or from the lower bottom part, or even they might try and compensate for any stiffness in the lower back by bending forward from their neck and their upper back. So we're looking at kind of 3 points of curvature on their back. And what you're aiming for is to try and keep almost like a ski slope type position when you bend. And that's the best thing. I like that analogy. I've always used that analogy. Like, could I ski off your back?
Keep nice and is it kind of like locked in, or is it you're engaging your core?
You should absolutely be engaging your core. So you should be engaging your core. So that's as if you're imagining you're in tighter trousers. So a lot of people just belly suck. They kind of suck their tummy muscles in and they go, oh, I'm engaging my core. And you can see that they're physically pulled all the muscle and skin inwards, but they're bracing. So that's like an imprinting bracing type position. What you want to do is just gently imagine your waistband as a circle You want to just draw in as if you're shrinking your waistband by sort of 10-15%, something like that. So just gently drawing in all the way around, as if someone's given you like a corset, or imagine a dancer would kind of hold themselves and they kind of hold themselves into that position. So you want to maintain that and breathe, because a lot of people forget to breathe. And if you hold your breath, you're going to raise your blood pressure, but it also increases your intra-abdominal pressure. So you would put more pressure on your discs in your back.
Yes.
And we don't want that, because we know that if we're the ages of 35 to 55, that we could end up causing ourselves or putting ourselves at risk of a disc prolapse, or as what people used to call a slip disc. So you need to be careful with your breathing, and you should always breathe out as you go into a lift, so you're not holding that pressure in your body. And looking at other areas within your body. So, how stable and strong are my ankles? Because people overlook that. And if you're wobbling around on your ankles and you're kind of rolling in, uh, or you just don't look very strong in your calf muscles or in your quad muscles, or you've got a stiff knee. So, say,
Yes.
for example, one knee is actually quite flexible and there's a meniscal injury in another, or you play a lot of sport and you dominate on one leg, it's all going to contribute to the weight shift through your body. So, are you leaning more, even if it's minuscule, are you leaning more to the left? Are you leaning more to the right as you go down into that squat position? So, you're looking for that key center point position as best you can. And then again, looking at forward and back motion, is someone sitting back through their heels adequately, or are they going through their toes and pushing through their toes and not distributing the load through the feet and the base of support? And again, you should always think about not only your core muscle contraction, but even your pelvic floor. So people probably don't think about this. I think ladies are starting to think more about it. But as you lift anything, and it should be if you're lifting a baby at home out of a cot for, young parents, or if you're lifting something in an awkward position out of your car boot, say, for example, it's something heavy, or you're carrying weights just functionally, like shopping bags, things like that. It doesn't always have to be a heavy, heavy gym weight that you kind of look at and you think, well, I need to be careful because that says 15 kilograms on it. Some things don't come labeled, so you just need to be cautious. Then you should really be engaging both your core muscles and your pelvic floor muscles,
Yes.
because they all act as a hammock to hold up your internal organs. And if you don't, then you put yourself at risk of more internal kind of issues or injuries. So they're the areas that you need to particularly think about. And people leave out their upper limb. So if you have a weaker shoulder, stiffer shoulder, you sit desk based all day and you become very stiff in your upper back, you're not going to be a great person to kind of drop the shoulder, make sure all the energy is going to your core muscles and your legs. You might be trying to lift with your hips or with your back, and
Okay.
we want everything to work together. And then you sometimes see that even if someone can keep a really good position through their lower back, so they've got that ski slope position with their back, they might bend their head forward or have their neck extended. So it's about keeping the back of the head in line with your back too, so that your
Okay.
chin back in a little bit, so that your spine is kept as sort of elongated and as straight as possible, even though you're in that tipping forward position. So there's quite a lot to think about
Yeah,
before you even
totally.
do that. Did you realize there was so much to it, Henry? Have
Well,
you ever?
weightlifting is not really something I've ever really done. Like I don't have weights at home and I don't go to a gym. I mentioned before I go to an exercise class, which is it's probably mostly cardio, so it's a lot of burpees and jumps and jumping around and running and whatnot. And then probably a couple of times a month we do have weights and we'll be doing reps, but probably the heaviest weight is probably 10 kilo dumbbells. So we're doing, kind of lunges and all sorts of stuff with weights. So we're not doing kind of deadlifts. When I think of a deadlift, I guess I've seen the jacked men on Instagram that like you could do this or that kind of stuff. I haven't fallen prey to their advertising just yet. But is it literally just lifting as heavy a weight as possible from the ground up and up to a kind of up to your waist and then dropping down again? Is that like now? Obviously, I realize there's the kind of like the bravado of like that you can flex how heavy you can lift compared to your friend or your work colleague, brother or whatever it is. Um, but is it like a good exercise? Like, what's the benefit of lifting a really heavy weight? Like, or is it just to kind of how to show off and sound good?
No, they're not showing off. There is evidence behind lifting weights. Our muscles need load to adapt and to create change. And as the way I kind of describe it to patients is that we almost need to, and when I talk about just the muscles in isolation now, so this isn't other body parts, but we need to almost create a little bit of micro trauma in the muscles. We need to kind of
Yeah,
tear a few
yeah,
of those little muscle fibers as we lift weight. And that's what happens when we gradually and incrementally and safely increase weight. And you should do that slowly, and that's because then the muscle will mold and develop and remodel and change, and you get that adaptation and you create tensile strength. So the fibers in the muscle will line up nicely if you apply load to them, as opposed to if you keep loading and you don't stretch, for instance, the fibers all cross over and they look like a load of spaghetti on a plate, all kind of jumbled up. And people go, "Well, I lift weight and I increment my weight, but I don't stretch." And I'm like, "Well, that's that. You need to, because if you increment your weight, you need to stretch out those muscle fibers so that they keep realigning. And then the straighter they are, the more adaptable they are and the more able they are to tolerate load.
yes.
So you'll actually achieve higher, better performance if you do stretch alongside your weight training. So
Okay,
people
well, that's good
tend
to
to
know.
neglect, and you do see that. You see that a lot. You see people going, "Well, I've kind of done a very," and if they've done a brilliant program of like incrementing the weight very gradually, they don't always apply the stretch. And with muscles and tendons, we have to be a little bit careful with those as we get older, if there's different hormonal changes, especially for ladies, but also men, because we do see these changes in tendons regardless of age. And as you get older, they do need a little bit longer to turn over. And so there's some evidence to say that 48 to 72 hours, you need to allow your muscle and tendon cells to remodel. Because if you overload them too quickly, they lay down larger proteins within the muscle or tendon, and then they just kind of get a little bit more hydrophilic. So they absorb and contract or attract water into them, and they swell. And then they don't actually remodel very well because they think they're in a hurry, because they think, right, you're going to put more load under us again in another day and another day and another day. So they don't have time to organize and lay out all the tendon cells. You can imagine under a microscope, can't you, how neat they would probably
Yeah,
look
yeah, definitely.
if you apply a bit of weight, keep the cells healthy, and they line up all nicely and nice and straight. And if you're stretching and you're helping that process, then you're going to get a better quality muscle tendon rather than something that's quite grumbly and where it looks chronic. And you can actually see that. You can scan them and you can see that you get infiltration into muscle and it gets a bit fatty and it gets a bit not very nice if you don't kind of take care of both your diet, your hydration, and
Yeah.
your training schedule. So there's
And
quite a lot to.
yeah, yeah, a lot to think about. And so with a deadlift, obviously, I guess because you're coming from a bending down position, does that mean that you're using your legs, your core, and your arms? So is it almost like a kind of full body
Yeah.
workout, or what? Like, because I guess when I think of weights, I guess I just think about doing bicep curls. I'm probably a bit basic.
So you've got your kind of squat from the ground, so you could just do your kind of squat positions, and that's where you try and keep your back sort of into that ski slope position. You've also then got your kind of deadlifting where people tend to they look like they're hinging more from the hip. They're kind of standing. You shouldn't really ever completely lock out your knees. They should be slightly soft so that you're engaging the muscles but not stressing at the back
Yeah,
of the
the
leg.
joint. Yeah,
And then you would hold, so you need good grip strength. So if you know your grip strength's not very strong, then you need to be careful with that. And you would hold onto the bar and you would come up lifting the weight and you would pop it back down.
yeah,
Some people start too heavy and too low, so they would have the weight down on the ground. But there's nothing wrong with having the weight up onto like a step or a block of something, and try and till it as long as it's stable. So when you're
Yeah.
putting your weight, it doesn't roll onto your foot. But you could, if you're not using too heavy a weights and you're really mindful of that, you can actually pop it up a bit higher and then standing up with that. Now, that technique particularly uses your hamstring muscles quite a lot. So, if someone's very tight or weak in their hamstrings or predisposed to back pain or any disc pain, I would err on the side of caution with advising that. I would want to see some better squat positions
Yes.
first. And it would be really important that you don't just do that in isolation. You would need to be doing other forms of exercise, whether that's swimming, walking, cycling, Pilates, stretching.
So if I'm not currently doing any kind of heavy weights like deadlifts, etc., and I don't particularly want to join a gym, I'm not quite ready to make that. So do I need to go on Facebook Marketplace and find myself some old school rusty weights that I can store in the back of the kitchen and then do some deadlifts? Or is there other exercises that I can kind of recreate without having to buy all the kit? Or do you just kind of need a metal bar and some heavy weights that you can build up on?
Often, yeah. So you can do exercise with very little equipment. You could just have. So I always say to people, what do you have already at home? So do you already have a set of like dumbbells or weights at home?
Yeah, we
Henry?
do, but they probably only go up to like 10 kilos each. So yeah, so 20 kilos.
Yeah. 20 kilos. That's quite a lot. And often we will look at somebody's technique with the weight that they say they're doing in the gym. And we'll often, most times, probably I'd say 90% of the time, we would probably knock down their weight because they think they're lifting that weight well,
Yeah.
but actually they're compensating. So you're better to do a smaller weight and do it well and get the technique and the quality better than not doing that. But if you've got like 20 kilograms, you've got 10 kg of weights either side, you could start with there's lots of things you can do actually. You can do things like a golfer's lift type position where you can actually keep your back straight and you counterbalance. So you stand, I'll try and do a little demo. So you kind of stand one leg in front of the other,
Yes.
and then you would hold your weight in front. So say you've got your left leg
Yes.
standing in front of you, right leg back. You got your right arm to counterbalance, and you would lean forward with that weight, keeping the back straight,
Yes.
and you could even bend the leg so that you're training with the weight and the load,
Okay.
and you can, and then obviously switch over. So you could do things like that. It's very simple, very functional, and it's an exercise that's overlooked, in my opinion,
Yeah.
because it's very hard and that builds up the gluteal muscles, it builds up the legs and the ankles and the core stability, and you can increment the weight. And it's a very easy thing to see whether or not you're doing it right or wrong, because if you do it wrong, you're going to topple over. And it's a clear instruction to keep your hips square and to keep them level as you go into that golfer's position. So, and that's how you can counter do it. Some people call it arabesques. They're called arabesques in ballet, like into kind of dance and things like that too.
And how, like, without turning into a gym buddy and going every day, how much time should I spend doing some weights a week?
So yeah, so the recommendation is sort of 2 to 3 sessions a week of sort of 20 to 25 minutes of strength training, or some people just globally say like a couple of strength training sessions a week, so depending on how
Okay.
much time you've got. So we should be focusing on some strength, and then alongside that, you've got your 150 minutes of aerobic activities. It's quite a lot, isn't it, to fit in?
It's
Uh,
quite a bit.
and then
So
you've
I
got to
think
try and
I
do
think
core work.
I think I'm doing enough on the cardio. I think because I'm doing these two sessions and then live a fairly kind of active life anyway. But I think yeah, probably the weights is something that I don't do enough of, and I think it's because I don't have them at home, uh, and I don't go to a gym, so it's like you're not kind of around it. But it is something that you're kind of seeing more and more, and particularly when you start reading about as you get older, like keeping muscle on. Like I've probably seen kind of elder people in my family, and as they get older, they do lose that muscle, and then if they fall or they hurt themselves, they lose that stability, and you just think actually. So it's something that I'm more conscious of that I don't want to waste my prime years and not build that muscle.
Yeah, they don't wait. But muscles are quite forgiving, so you can keep muscles. The kind of myth is that you can't make your muscles stronger when you're older. You can, you just have to work harder at them because you
Got it.
just lose more muscle mass as you get older, and that's why it's so important to do that. But I get, my osteoporotic, osteopenic patients in clinic, I encourage them to work. So I will look at their technique with bending, and then
Yeah,
I will get them doing some kind of like little modified squats and like those little arabesque or golfers type positions, and they're hard, but actually you can get good at them very quickly, which is quite satisfying.
yeah,
But things like wall sits with holding weights and just going against the walls that do your core work as well as your leg strength. You're going to also get some loading as well with that. So,
yeah,
and that's a good place to start if you are not confident with squatting and you're not sure if you suffer with back pain. And you think, right, well, I get back pain every time I squat. And it's just because someone's core strength isn't keeping up with the weight they're trying to lift. So you do have to think, okay, what am I doing core wise? And I know when we did the Tim Bresnan episode, we talked to him about it, didn't we? And I don't know if you'll remember, but he enjoyed doing the kind of plank type rollouts with gym balls, and that's an exercise we've always liked in physio. So you can go in different directions to kind of build up your core strength and it's a great one because you're not going to upset your back.
yeah,
And I think that's an important point to remember. What you do now, and then I love this saying, and I think it gets you thinking, what you do now, will your 80-year-old self thank you for it? And it could be that you're not doing enough, in which case your 80-year-old self will think, what have you done? Like you've not done enough to me. We're now suffering, the bones are suffering, the muscles are
yeah,
suffering, the metabolic systems are not functioning as well. Exercise has so many benefits, but also, are you choosing the wrong exercise in this decade of your life that not only leaves you prone to injury in the next decade, but when you're 80, are you going to be able to do that? Because what we don't often talk about is, but we see it, is that as you get older, you can have something called spinal stenosis and narrowing in the spinal canal. And these conditions can often be a result of people who have done lots of heavy physical lift. I'm not saying everyone that does any heavy lifting will get it, but think if you've maltreated your back doing the wrong techniques, wrong type of sport, your work has great as back in the day when nurses perhaps used to have to lift because there wasn't lifting equipment and all the manual handling regulations in place, things like that that could particularly contribute over time. And it's not just a few one-offs. This would have to be done a lot badly for a long period of time. But yeah, there's no sort of like, well, that caused that. It's very difficult. Patients will go, well, did that cause that? And I'm like, well, not really. It's more of a what's happened collectively over time. And some people are predisposed to things like this, but generally, if we can keep our core muscles really good and we can exercise and think about joint positions when we exercise and not just looking at the area itself. So, not just seeing it as a squat or a deadlift, but okay, how good are my hamstrings? Are they as strong as they need to be? How good are my quad muscles and my thigh muscles? How good are my ankles? Do I do any jumping and plyometric work, especially if I want to be a hockey player or a basketball player? Can I jump? Can I jump high and can I land and can I land without rolling my ankle? And am I very fast with my kind of sprint and running around? And do I practice that? Do I practice change of direction? And do I sort of do proprioceptive work where you get to really challenge your body in space in terms of, do I know where my body is in space? If I close my eyes and can I catch a ball on a single leg because, someone's throwing me a heavy weighted ball or something that's going to require me to have to think? And
yeah,
are my legs going to be prepared for that? So doing things like that, and then also looking at upper limb because that gets overlooked as well. So trying to be strong, lower limb. How good are you? Upper limb. How flexible are you? Do you think about your neck strength? Some people, if they working at a desk all day, they become very weak around their scapular muscles, so their shoulder blades, and they get very weak around their neck and they get weak and stiff in their thoracic spine. They might not do rotational exercise, but maybe, some cable work where you're doing some resistance work through a range, especially if you're a golfer. We get people doing it in the opposite direction to the direction that they have to like swing the golf.
Yeah, yeah, because they're building, I thought on one side, not the other. Gotcha.
Yeah. And then doing things like, okay, how can you make that more challenging? Because balance is so important in whether you're young or old, balance is really good for sport. So can you do any of these exercises on a single leg? Because it makes it much more challenging. Can you change and play around with the base of support? And that's when we get people on those kind of like Bosey balls. You see those in the gym. But you don't have to go to a gym to use one of those. That is something that's simple. We've talked, I think, before about using the wobble boards and using those to break up your sitting position at work and things like that. But you can use them to quite high functional levels in your sport and in exercise. So there's lots you can do with those as well. So
Amazing.
trying to get that combination of everything together.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's super interesting. And also, all the things you're saying, I'm like, yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. Sitting at a desk all day, weak neck. Yes, that's me. So it's good to be reminded that we need to, um, keep 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 pushing ourselves and keep trying. But also, that you were saying right at the beginning about how important it is to have the kind of correct posture, and that actually, if you go too fast, you can end up causing yourself more issues that then long term can become problematic, and that's not what we want, is it? So it's kind of it's
No.
start
And we
all the
and we
start right and
spend
build it slowly.
That's it. I know we spend a lot of time with the surgeons and the consultants, and we read all the stuff that they send us in terms of patient letters and things, and what they recommend or what they can or can't do for someone. And it's really heartbreaking for people if they've tried or they've gone through numerous surgeries and they're not feeling as good. And I have patients who say, "Gosh, I wish I knew this when I was
Yeah,
younger."
yeah, yeah.
And I always say to them, "I wish you could talk to my younger, like
Yes. Yeah,
to
yeah.
younger populations and tell them this is what could happen." So it's really important that we look after ourselves. And a lot of the time, I don't know where the errors can sometimes come when people have a misconception about what they should be doing. Sometimes there's this sadness in my opinion that people feel they've got to keep up with their person they go to the gym with, and there's this, well, you live 25 and I lift 15, so you must be better than me.
Yes.
And sometimes, not everyone does that, but it's important not to compare yourself to others. Any exercise is good. And yeah, just trying to be sensible and thinking if your body's not up for it, or if you're getting symptoms 24 to 48 hours after doing it, which isn't just the delayed onset of muscle soreness where you feel a bit achy after doing
Yeah.
something. If you're getting sharp pains, pins and needles, tingling,
Take a step
numbness,
back.
yeah, you're doing something wrong and you should stop and seek some
Yes.
some support. Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, well, thank you. That's some great info there. And always a pleasure to chat with you, Hayley. And really, what makes it better is when we get good engagement from our listeners. So if you enjoy it, please do share it with your friends and family. Like us, send us a comment. It all helps in boosting us up the ranks and getting more ears and eyeballs on the healthy bit. Anyway, good chat. And until next time, Hayley.
Yes, thanks very much, Henry. Thank you very much. See you next time.